Brian, as someone who's been studying this topic and researching for years and decades, and you refer a lot in your books when it comes to these topics, you refer to very well known scholars and theologians. Would it be fair to ask someone like you, hey, in your understanding and research and studies so far, especially the Old Testament, the whole Bible, but especially the Old Testament, would it be fair to say that the authors we're not trying to say that the earth is old 6,000 years. They were not trying to say that the earth literally has four corners. They were not trying through genealogies to prove how old is the earth. They were not trying to explain plethora of things that we nowadays, like you said, if we read literally, we can come up with all these different conclusions like the earth is flat, the earth is shallow. Oh my God, could this be and then people come with all these things of conspiracies and stories, and then people argue sometimes in the same church. Good friends can argue about I'm not saying these things are not important, but in your research so far, would you agree or not that uh, the Old Testament authors, they were, instead of, like you said, instead of being scientific, they were trying to first show God's glory and majesty. Second, they were trying to show important theological messages, especially for a certain number. For example, in genealogies, in Matthew and Luke, was it number 14 that repeats often? So there is a message behind that, rather than, hey, put this together and count how old is the earth. Could it be that through some of these things, or like hell being under the earth, or like the angels being equated to the stars in heaven, could this rather be that they were trying to show God as the supreme king, ruler, and creator who has everything under his control, and that through a repetition of certain processes, numbers, symbols, the authors would actually try to connect all these different books of the Bible, like for example, with gods, with demons, with whatever, and send a message to the people who are their contemporaries and to us nowadays. But because we're so much separated from that ancient context, because we were born thousands of years after that, could it be that we have misunderstood what the original authors in the Old Testament try to say? Not to show something like 2 and 2 and 4, but rather, hey, observe symbols, observe these numbers, observe patterns of repetition, and understand our message. Would you agree that this is rather the truth, and not like, oh, shape is like the earth of pizza? I don't care if it's shape of pizza. I don't care if the earth is old gazillion years or 100 years. It seriously doesn't change or affect my faith at all. It doesn't affect my faith if we landed on the moon, or that's one of the NASA's supposedly scams and conspiracies. I don't think they scammed or lied. And again, my faith and my worldview do not change for one bit. So would
Yeah.
you agree, like the ancient people rather try to, through these symbols, numbers, and patterns, to show some theological messages rather than just being scientific and tell us, hey, this is how you must believe in this, scientific laws?
Uh yes. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I believe. And yeah, so we have to stop approaching the biblical text as if it's a modern scientific or even historical text, because the way we do history is different than the way they did history in the ancient world. Um, and we have to seek to understand within his ancient Near Eastern context first. And our goal should be to seek the meaning of the text. What are they trying to teach us? What's the meaning? What's the supernatural? What's the spiritual meaning that they're trying to communicate? That's not to say that it didn't happen. I'm not saying that at all. Yes, I believe the Exodus happened. Yes, I believe God part of the Red Sea. But what did that look like, and how did it? What really happened? Well, that we have to be open to the fact that the way we understand things now may not be the way that they were intending to communicate it back then. So we have to have a hermeneutic of humility. We have to stop imposing our own assumed hyperliteral, scientific, post-enlightened mindset on the text, and start to first seek to understand what What's the message behind it? And then, yes, we can explore things about, well, is this historical, or is this a legend, or is this a parable? Maybe, sometimes there are, you know, there are stories that are not said to be true or not. And you can't assume that they're literal. Like Job is a classic example. Job, it's been shown that Job follows the story structure of an ancient play. It could be a play. And so what if it is? Now, I believe it. I believe it happened as far as I know. But what I'm saying is, if you study and find out that the genre is actually something you didn't realize, it doesn't change the meaning of the text, does it? And that doesn't therefore mean, oh, everything's myth and nothing really happened. No, that's ridiculous, because that's not how literature is written. And there's clearly, the Bible's written over thousands of years, hundreds of authors, whatever, dozens of authors. And so you can't just say everything's the same, because it's not. So there is some things that are literal history, and there is some things that are metaphorical and symbolic history. And there are some things that we don't even know the genre. And so, yeah, we just have to approach the text with more humility than I think we have. And modern Christians are very guilty of imposing this sort of like, whatever the text literally says, by my modern understanding, that's it. And everybody else is a liberal. If you don't believe this, you're a liberal. You don't believe the Bible because you don't believe it the way I believe it. It's like, that's so ridiculous that only a fool could think that way. And so we have to be careful about when we're approaching that, and the assumptions we make when we're saying something. I get this a lot from people, where they're just, well, I believe the Bible literally. You don't. It's like, no, you don't believe the Bible literally. You don't believe that the dragon in Revelation is literal, do you? No, it's symbolic. So you don't believe the Bible's all literal. We all realize that the Bible is full of some literal truths, some metaphorical, some imprecise truths. There's some textual transmission problems with it. So we understand that there's all kinds of factors that we have to really approach the text from a more cautious way. And that's being humble with the text and letting the Bible and its original context take priority over our agenda. That's my goal.